Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, welcome to my YouTube video. This is going to be a review of episode 1 of Dear Mama, which is the new documentary out right now about Tupac Shakur and Afeni Shakur, and I'm super excited to share my thoughts with you guys. And so let's get into it. So let's start with the sound. The opening, I enjoy watching any project where you know why it's called what it's called, however they get to it, whenever they get to it in the project. So I love that they opened with like, hey, this is why we call it Dear Mama, right? So they're telling us this story about Halloween in 1993, which I had heard before. Like, Tupac sees this black guy getting beat up by 2 white men. If I'm not mistaken, those 2 white men actually ended up being 2 they're ununiformed. Excuse, I think that's the word I'm looking for. Ununiformed police officers. So he sees it and he shoots at them. His cousin said in the documentary, like, in that moment I realized he was going to protect black people at all costs. So, but they say like right after that happened, they go to the hotel room and Tupac's like, well, you know, like they're saying like, I'm hearing police sirens. And Tupac is like, oh, I got a song I want y'all to hear, and he plays Dear Mama for the first time, and I just thought that was just super dope. I love the intro credits, the way it was shot. It kind of reminded me of Soul Food, the way that movie opens. It's kind of like a pan over like a table, if you will, of like just different things and like that are symbolic, if you will, or things that we would think of maybe when we think of these people. The music is by Atticus Ross, Leopold Ross, and Claudia Sarn. And the only reason why I'm coming here and giving y'all these names, I'm dropping these names, is because I'm like, put some respect on these people's names. They did an amazing job, super dope. Sound design and the music supervision was just impeccable. There was times where they were like playing Tupac's music, but they had changed the background music, the beat, and it just made it otherworldly. Because of the documentary Tupac's Resurrection. See, now I'm fucking the name up. Because of that documentary, I feel like every time I hear Tupac's voice now, it always feels like he's talking to me from like heaven or however you know, whatever it is you believe in. So I think doing that to the music in this documentary kind of gave me that same feeling. The music supervision is by Cisa Klein Moberly, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Janet Rich and Janet Billingrich, which I think that's probably the same person. I got this off of IMDb, no offense to IMDb, but I imagine there just can't be 2 Janet Billings, but if there are, shout out to both the girls. And yeah, it was just amazing. There was an acapella for Trapped, which is at the end of the documentary, and that particularly was just, it was amazing. It was amazing. And the way I think they then took changes, but they like I said, they're doing something to the music in this because it doesn't just sound like when you're listening to Changes by Tupac. And the way they meshed that together was just chef's kiss, if you will. The next thing I want to talk about was the visuals. I think the visuals mixed with what was going on with the sound design and the music supervision just like heightened the experience of watching this documentary. They had like graphics of like blood, like, so his cousins are in the beginning and they're telling this story, and it's Tupac's cousins Dante and Billy telling this story. So when they're just using the visuals to emphasize what they're talking about, so we're seeing fire, we're seeing blood. And my favorite visual of everything that I saw in the documentary was that they took one of these what I think is a very famous picture of Tupac. That was a black and white photo, and it's like of his face, and like the highlight in the photo, the white in the photo, they have taken it and put this blue and red police, like, you know, siren lights over the highlights, and that mixed with what we're hearing. So at one point we also see like Afeni's face, and then you see Tupac's lyrics, like his handwritten lyrics or his handwritten poem, like over her face, and then like depending on what part of the story is being told in that moment. I just feel like everything they did visually and everything they did with the sound just heightened the story that was being told. It just heightened the experience of watching the documentary, and I just really enjoyed that. So some things that I learned that I did not know about Tupac. I did not know that the Black Panther Party, which I'm surprised I didn't know this, but I'm not surprised by it at all now that they have said it in the documentary. They used to go into the dope spots and disarm the drug dealers, take their drugs and pour them down the sewer. You gotta love the Black Panther Party. They was out here, they was doing what they needed. They was doing what needed to be done. I did not know that Tupac, had he not got a record deal, was going to get was going to become a chairman in the new African Black Panther Party. I knew where Tupac's name came from, Tupac Amaru Shakur. I knew that he was named after an Inca chief, but I did not know that Afeni named him after an Inca chief because she was trying to show him that Black people were not the only people that had been oppressed. I thought that was super dope. I went to the museum, the like pop-up museum, and I'm sorry if I'm not using the right name to describe what it was, but it was the Wake Me When I'm Free museum that was at one point in LA, and I think they said it was going to travel around. And from being in there, and I'll put some things up that y'all can see of what I'm talking about, but just being in there, you really got to see just how magical Afeni was. And she just always seemed to be constantly thinking about being like, not even thinking about, but she was just always being impactful, right? Like really caring about the name of her child and making sure that it had a meaning, and passing on, you know, just continuing to pass on more and more knowledge to him, and just how important books were to her, the written word, which they talked about in this documentary also, and you could see that too from that museum experience. I did not know that one of the things that Afeni's chapter did was take over the hospital and demand that they treat the people, but again, not surprised by that. But I do love knowing that new fact. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about this documentary, were the new facts that I learned about this particular chapter of the Black Panther Party, and also what Afeni did in the Black Panther Party. So one of my favorite things that I learned was that Afeni, with members of the Young Lords and some doctors, co-wrote the first patient Bill of Rights. I knew Afeni was brilliant, right? I did a short documentary for my film classes on Afeni's impact on Tupac, really Tupac's revolutionary ideology, but wanting to give the base that came from his mother and many other people that he was around, but you know, in my documentary, particularly his mother. And I knew she was brilliant because I knew she represented herself in court, and I was like, anybody that can do that, like between her and Angela Davis, got to be brilliant. So yeah, finding out that she co-authored the Patient's Bill of Rights, and this movie being about legacy, right? Like, you people like Tupac Shakur and Afeni Shakur don't ever die because of things like this. I did not know that Tupac had to cut his hair off because of that incident of police brutality that he experienced in Oakland, and I think that was, I thought I wrote down the year, but I didn't. I knew about that. That was talked about. I haven't watched a lot of documentaries about Tupac. The only one, and the main one, besides watching clips of him, his interviews on YouTube, has been the resurrection of Tupac, or Tupac Resurrection. And in that they talk about that incident of police brutality, and I've seen him talk about, and like, you know, clips from the interview where he talks about it, but I did not know that it was so severe that he got alopecia. I did not know that's why he cut his hair. I always wondered that, because I saw Tupac as like bald, of course, first, but then when I went back and watched Juice, I was like, oh, Tupac had hair. I wonder what made him cut it. Like, I wonder if he started going bald, or so that was wild. One of the other things I learned from watching the documentary was the trial, the police, and everything, and how all of that affected Afeni and how that might have led to her drug use. Blood was someone they interviewed. He is a veteran of the Black Panther Party, and he talked about how Afeni needed therapy. And one of the things I thought of was Huey P. Newton. I was on a call once with an elder amongst many other people, and she said something about Huey P. Newton that just never sat right with me. I know the things that he did near like the latter part of the Black Panther Party, or the latter part of his life, and I had heard of the things that he was alleged to have done. And the first thing I remember thinking was that you're not even supposed to keep, I remember watching the Time documentary and them talking about how it's illegal to keep animals in solitary confinement for, like, whether it was at all or for a certain period of time. And I thought about Huey P. Newton being kept in solitary confinement during the time that he was in prison, and the effect that had on his mind. And you know, compare that to, again, the Time documentary where they're talking about the effect of solitary confinement and how long Khalif Browder was in solitary confinement, and how that led to probably some actions that, you know, of course don't sit well with us, that aren't right, but I could imagine you probably need help and therapy after going through and being in solitary confinement. And so then comparing that to Afeni Shakur, I don't think I ever really sat with some of the things that she went through and how that probably led to her drug abuse. And it makes sense, complete and total sense, to be a Black woman in America, to be on trial for life, if I'm not mistaken, or was it death? You know, somebody in the comments let me know. I can't remember if she was kind of like Angela Davis. I know they were talking about the death penalty with Angela Davis, but I don't know if the same was true for Afeni Shakur, if it just was going to be life in prison. But that's all the stress of that, and you know, everything else that went on in her life, the downfall of the Black Panther Party, being infiltrated by police. I can absolutely see that leading to, you know, needing some therapy and some drug abuse. So yeah, that was something I was happy that the documentary made me think about, and made me sit with and contemplate for a while. My favorite quotes: Pac lived 3 lives in 8 months. and that was said by that was said by Edie Mean. And what I wrote down to talk about was All Eyes on Me. So I think one of the reasons why the film All Eyes on Me wasn't good was because they had so much to cover in such a short period of time, and somebody could have pulled it off for sure, but I think it felt like watching that film, it went like somebody just went through Tupac's life and just checked off things, and there was no real depth to them. Because exactly like Edie Mean, and I hope I'm saying his name right, said, Tupac was a lot of different things. And I think that was what made him so brilliant. One of the things that made him so brilliant, right? Like you could hear it in his music. You guys, revolutionary music. He's got songs like I Get Around. He's got songs, Dear Mama. He's got Brenda's Got a Baby. And you can hear just how round of a character. Like that's what we talk about. Like when you create characters in films, he was just such a round human being, and you can see it. And so when Edie Mean said that, it was one of my favorite quotes, because I was like, this is exactly how I've always felt about Tupac, that he was a lot of different things. My other favorite quote was, Afeni wanted the story told correctly. That means blemishes and all, so people can understand the whole thing, what makes a human being as he and a human being as she. And that was Glow, Afeni's sister, that said that. And Glow was my favorite. I love the way that she used words. I love the way that she told stories, and she was saying these things about her sister, and I'm like, this must run in y'all family, because I am captivated. I love the way you were telling the story, and I love the story that you're telling. I really enjoy Glow. Effect. And so another quote from Glow was that Afeni was a wanderer and a wanderer. She opened up my world, and I want you to, like, essentially she said, imagine what that must have been like for Tupac, having this woman as a mom. And that's what this documentary is about, right? That was kind of what story I wanted to tell with my own documentary when I was taking my film classes, was that Afeni had a profound effect on Tupac. We would not have Tupac without Afeni. We wouldn't have songs, right? Like, especially like Brenda's Got a Baby, especially like Changes, and a lot of the songs on Tupacalypse, which I don't know them by title, but especially the one they use at the end of this documentary, the first episode of the docuseries. They had the same spirit. Someone said they were both charismatic, intelligent, argumentative, and they took control of a room. Like, she passed on so many beautiful things to her son. And so I think the world, as much as we adore Tupac, have to adore Afeni, or there would be no Tupac without Afeni. And I love that this documentary is doing such a good job. This docuseries is doing such a good job of highlighting that Afeni had a profound impact on her son. They were talking about how someone they were interviewing, and I didn't write their name down, they were talking about how it would be 8 o'clock in the morning and Tupac would already have read 2 papers, a book, listened to 2 records, and watched a movie. They talked about how he studied people, and I think about, again, just the effect that Afeni had on her son, and that she taught him to study. I remember learning at the museum that one of the forms of punishment that Afeni had for Tupac when he did something wrong was making him read the newspaper. And then I think at some point they changed that because she didn't want him to see reading as a punishment, and then it just became something that he thoroughly enjoyed. And so I was not surprised to hear that in the documentary, and I'm like, that absolutely is another, I know that's like something that got passed down from his mom. Like, being a Black Panther, you had to read so many hours a day. I can't remember, maybe 2 hours a day, mandatory 2-hour a day reading, and you had to be up on current events and things like that. So these are all things that Afeni passed on to her son, and I'm sure it's inextricable that it led to his success as a rapper, as an artist. And that is everything. So I am excited to do a review on episode 2